Hello, everyone. My name is Laura Benegatti, and I am the co-founder and CEO of the Artbound Initiative program. Artbound Initiative is a global career accelerator. We're helping students and fresh grads to get into the creative industries, which are very difficult to enter and very much about relationships. And so in our mission, we're trying to provide as much as possible, like an insider perspective in this industry, and that's in this capacity that we've asked Jen Clazel to come and join us today. So Jen, thank you so much for being here. I'll get to your introduction in a second. I will get first very briefly to the event highlights. We will be doing a bit of a Q&A, of course, with Jen, asking a little bit more about, her trajectory, getting a bit of the information about, what does MTV Paramount looks like. And I'm sure she has a lot of great, insights for us. We will also be introducing the Artbound Initiative program in the middle of the session. And then we will return afterwards to a Q&A where you can ask any questions, both to Jen or to me, about the program. So without further ado, I want to introduce Jen, who's here. Jen and I actually have been working for many years together back in the days when we started, when she was at CBS and hiring our interns as well, working for the Rachel Ray Show. We've kept in touch over the years, and it's been a pleasure to see her journey. And we are now actually still working together as she's joined Artbound Initiative as a coach. So Jen is a production coordinator at Paramount within the MTV Entertainment Group, working on shows such as The Daily Show, Jersey Shore, Family Vacation, Teen Mom Franchise, and the MTV documentary film Slate. She has over 9 years of experience working in production management, live stream producing, and has worked for The Rachel Ray Show, Worst Cooked in America, Introdo/West, and more. Jen, thanks for being here.
Yeah, thank you for having me again.
Of course. So let me just stop sharing my screen and now we'll get, to the Q&A time. So maybe, Jen, to start with, of course, would love to maybe hear a little bit about, you, right? And like, what are you up to? I think production is such a vague term, right, for a lot of people here. Tell us a little bit more maybe briefly about your journey and like, what does it mean, right, to be a producer at a place like MTV Paramount? We'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah, sure. So I actually started in TV. It was a little different just because I had family members who were in the industry, so I got exposed to it at a really young age. And I kind of just grew up being like, this is so cool. Like, this is exactly what I want to do. Like, how could I, be on set as a kid and like not think that this is like the coolest thing in the world? But I kind of just always heard from like my dad and my uncles not to do TV. Like they were always like, no, like get a job in like a more stable industry, like don't do TV. Just because I always saw them like freelancing and, it is hard. But I just kind of like found a niche where, I could kind of do my own thing and, make my own path in production management. It's just really different than, what everyone else does. So I guess just kind of going into a little bit about my story is that I went into college undeclared and I was like, do I really want to do TV? You know, maybe I'm just doing this just because like it seems like the easy choice. So I kind of like got in my head about it. But then by the time I had done like a couple of years of college, I was like, no, I actually like really do want to get into this. So I did the program at Montclair State, the TV production program. So my first gig was interning at Rachel Ray, and that was as a senior. Unfortunately, it was unpaid, so that was my first introduction to TV, was working unpaid, and it was hard. Going to college, I had to work 3 jobs just to like be able to afford, college and doing the internship and commuting and all that stuff. Um, and then I was able to go back the next semester, which was really cool. Like after I had graduated, they asked me to come back, and that time was paid. So I was like, thank God. A little bit of money. While I was working a couple of other jobs. So I kind of like alternated working, a couple part-time jobs and then interning there. And it was a really great experience coming back because I really got to develop relationships with people that had seen me like the previous semester and just kind of like make my face known and, get to know more people. I knew like coming, the second time around what questions to ask and who I wanted to, what departments I kind of wanted to learn more from. And then after that, they offered me a full-time position as a field PA. So I was like super excited. I was like, wow, they really like me. They asked me to come back again. Um, that was my first full-time gig in TV. And it was, a little hectic because it's, in the field. So we weren't in the studio. We were running around the city doing shoots here and there. I learned so much in that position. I learned how to make call sheets. Learned how to, what goes into the pre-production of a shooting it, and then also on the field side, like what goes into the post-production part of it. Just because originally I thought I wanted to do post-production and then realized that I really like, meeting people and talking to people, and I didn't really necessarily, no offense to anyone who does post-production, but I didn't really want to be stuck in a little cubicle for 12 hours. I was like, no, I want to be out and about. So that's what I kind of pivoted towards with the production management part. Um, and then I kind of moved up there throughout the years. Um, I was travel coordinator, so I got to learn how to make travel memos and greet celebrities and, you know, figure out car services and being very detail oriented because you can't really mess up in that position. You really have to be super careful. So I learned how to be very detail oriented. And that's when, after that, I transitioned to production coordinator, which was a big job, helping the production manager and the line producer just kind of manage the office and the studio and just kind of the whole show in general. Just kind of like learning all the ins and outs. Um, and just kind of being the department that everybody goes to for questions, even if it doesn't, normally pertain to your job, you have to help them figure it out. So just kind of being a liaison between all the different departments.
Amazing. And that's actually in this capacity that we were working together back then, right? When you were at CBS
Yeah.
and you were running everything, including the internship program. Like it was just
Mhm.
you were that person that everybody was coming to.
Yeah, definitely. Um, and yeah, I don't know if you want me to talk about a little bit after Rachel Ray or how we're doing on time. Um,
Well, would love to maybe hear a little bit about your transition to Paramount, right? And like kind of understanding like is the job at MTV right now at Paramount like the same that what you were doing, at Rachel Ray, and what does that look like for people, because I think there's so many different aspects to production. So I think just kind of hearing a little bit more about your job would be really cool.
yeah, definitely. So just to kind of like make a little bit of a transition, I definitely in between Rachel and Paramount, I did a project manager job for a platform that did virtual events. So that was kind of like my branching, position from doing, on-set production management, to becoming a project manager and having that like experience of really owning projects from the beginning to the end, and working on different things at the same time rather than, being focused on one show at a time. So now like my current position, it is technically still production management, but it's just on a much bigger scale. So I'm working on, a lot of different shows, and I guess the difference is really like kind of taking a step back and being in that corporate world. So it's like you have, you're touching everything, but it's not as like focused down and hands-on, obviously, as like being on set for a show. But I definitely still, have a lot to do with like setting the show up, um, and kind of following through and holding their hand, the production company, and getting them acquainted with, the Paramount standards that they should be following and, what they should be delivering at the end, as the end product, and making sure everything, everything's all good in terms of like procedures and processes.
So it's a lot of like it really is a lot of business skills, right? In the end of the day, I'm assuming, right?
Yeah, yeah.
That's
And
interesting.
I can talk a little bit more about like the whole department as a whole, if that helps kind of like get an idea.
Yeah, that'd be really cool.
So the MTV Entertainment Group spans across a couple different channels. So we don't only work on MTV, we work on Comedy Central shows, shows that are on P Plus, CMT, Showtime, formerly VH1, and BET. So it's like it's a lot of shows. The department, the team as a whole, you know, there's different departments. There's the production management, there's finance, there's legal, there's music licensing, there's footage licensing, like safety and security, there's social, like social and digital. There's a department called standards and practices, which really just kind of make sure everything's on brand across all the different channels, which is really fascinating. And then also social impact, which is, you might think like, oh, what's social impact? But it's really just a department to ensure that the things that we're producing and we're putting on TV has a positive social impact to the audience, which I thought was like fascinating when I joined. I was like,
Yeah.
that's so interesting. Um, and yeah, I think in a year, I would say our teams probably touch 150 to 200 different projects. And that's like pilots, presentations, series, you know, specials, sometimes movies for TV, those projects. It's a lot of different stuff.
Wow. And I think it's so interesting because like it's such a huge group, right? So it's like it has like two, I think a lot of people, are really stressed about getting into those big companies, but there's so many areas, right, that you could kind of get in, right? There's so many different jobs in TV, right? It's not just like directing or being on set, right? Or producing on set. So it's quite cool
Yeah.
to.
Yeah. I mean, you know, this company's huge. Sometimes there'll be people who are hiring and like, you know, people do like to hire internally, but sometimes you just don't know because there's just so many different departments. And this is just MTV Entertainment Group, not just, you know, there's also Nickelodeon. That's like a whole nother giant group of people that are technically still in the same company. It's crazy.
Wow. And where is it like do you work like is it in office? Because I know you are you still in New York? Like is it kind of in between New York, LA? Like how does it work?
Yeah, me personally, I'm on a hybrid schedule, so I go into the city in New York at the 1515 building uh, twice a week, and then I work from home 3 days a week. I have visited the LA office, but I'm not required to go there. So it's a nice little work trip when when I need to go. But otherwise, it's more like wherever you get hired is where your base is. You know, I have a lot of coworkers on my team who do work in LA. So sometimes my hours are a little crazy because I do have to work LA hours sometimes. But everyone's like super understanding. So
I'm sure. I'm sure. Well, I have so many other questions, but I'm seeing so many great questions, so I'm just gonna start going ahead and like going to the chat already. Thank you all for so many great questions here. So, Rudy's asking like, what would a production like coordinator do before and during a show? Like, how do you work with all the departments? Maybe if you can give us a little bit of insight about that.
yeah, sure. So I'll try and answer briefly for like onset versus like what I do. You know, if you're on set and you're pre-production, you're basically helping from the ground up. Like you would probably be helping hiring certain positions or helping interview for certain positions. And you know, your line producer or UPM, which is like a unit production manager that would be on set, is basically, you know, just starting from the budget, from building the budget and turning it into reality. So you could be, you know, doing runs to help set up the production office. You could be helping other departments get set up, like wardrobe and, you know, whoever. In terms of like my current position, what I do in pre-production when teams start, you know, I help set up the writers' room. So we hire the writers' assistants and the PAs just kind of like get off the ground. And then once we're, you know, kind of greenlit and good to go, we help them just on board with all of our procedures. So we help do kickoff calls with HR and legal, post, just to kind of get them up to date on all of our standards, and procedures. So really, like, you're producing the show, but really all they have to do is like follow our, guidelines. And sometimes it's to a benefit of them, where we're giving them like preferred vendors, where it's like a deal for them, so they're saving money.
Right.
Just to like make things easier for them, or sustainability, where we're like introducing them to preferred vendors for, either sustainability or diversity, just to give them those resources to succeed.
Super diverse, pretty much like so I think a lot of people are asking, and I'm seeing so many questions, so I'm going to try to get to most of them, but I see some people asking like what are the qualities and like maybe the background that employers are looking for production. I think that's a question that like a few people are kind of asking in different forms and shapes.
Yeah, it's kind of different, I'd say. Um, if you're looking to be on set more. It's definitely an industry, at least in my experience, where networking is super important. Like sometimes there's not even an interview, it's just someone who knows someone, and I'll text someone looking for PAs and they come back with a couple names. And then you just call them, and if they're available, you hire them because you trust that person that's giving you, that contact. Um, in terms of like me looking more on the corporate side, I do look for PAs or interns who have on-set experience, just because like I know I've been on set. So I know if you can handle being on set, that you can handle, the work that we do, on the corporate side, if that makes sense.
Right. So it's really kind of like, so you're saying it's kind of being there in the, like being there and being connected, like that's kind of like the big. So let me ask a question about that, because people are saying like, do you have any networking advice? I think that's a big one as well. It's like how can someone who doesn't necessarily like know people in the field can kind of start getting to, I guess being on those lists of PAs that are sent to you when you're
Yeah.
like a bunch of people being like, hey, I need PAs for this show. How can we get on that list?
Yeah, I mean it is hard. I totally understand, to like break into it. I would say the first step is to be available. If you get that call and you say no once, and then you get that call and you say no again. So it's like you just kind of have to like be open to it and be available. I know that's hard to do as well sometimes, just because everyone has a life, like we totally understand that. And then in terms of like getting to know people, I definitely tell people to, once you get that like first job, just really nurture those, connections that you do make and follow up with them too. Um, because like if you find someone who likes working with you, they're gonna recommend you. Um, now I'm not saying like you have to go out and go to networking events. It wouldn't hurt, but really nurturing the connections that you do make, and being a good employee in general is just, how you're gonna get recommended around to people.
For sure. I'm assuming it's very small industries, like it's really hard to kind of get in, but then once you're in, it's kind of like, a bit easier, right? Because you're kind of like
Yeah.
in a circle, I'm assuming, right?
Yeah, kind of.
Yeah, yeah, perfect. Just a reminder for everybody, we're not gonna unmute for anybody. I'm seeing some people raising their hands, but we're not unmuting on this call because we have too many people. So if you have any questions, please type them in the chat. Sorry about that. We're like 230 people almost here, so we're having to stay muted for everybody. So somebody has been asking about like, has there been, any difficult situations that you've been, working in with like all the different departments that are part of a single production? Maybe like what are the challenges for you in this type of job? I think it's interesting for people to hear that.
Yeah, sure. I mean, honestly, the experiences that I've had, a lot of stuff comes to mind. Being in production management, sometimes you get stuck with stuff that you don't want to do. Like I've done gross things, like, having to do with garbage and this and that, and like, the nitty-gritty. Like sometimes you just have to suck it up and do it. But I'd say the more challenging part is, maybe dealing with difficult personalities, honestly. and kind of developing a little bit of a thicker skin. If you're working with a director and EP, and sometimes you just have to like not take things personally if you've done something, incorrectly, just own up to it and try to correct the situation. I've definitely had a lot of situations like that. Um, it's just really being adaptable and not taking things personally. I know I'm making it sound horrible. Things are way better now than when I was an unpaid intern for sure. Um, but yeah, I hope that kind of answered your question.
No, I think that's real, right? Because we're dealing with creative people, and so like lots of big egos and how to manage this. And specifically as a producer, you're kind of supposed to be that calming force, right? Who's like
Hmm.
everybody's coming to. So I think it's definitely like I'm assuming when people were asking about different skills and backgrounds also for production, I definitely feel like somebody who can also remain calm under pressure and
Hmm.
good in in relationship building, I think is definitely probably a big thing, right? So
Yeah,
that
definitely.
I think it's good to be real. We need that. We're here for this. We want the real talk, not the sugar coated one. So of course there's going to be a lot of questions about Paramount hiring, right? Do you know if like Paramount, MTV, like do they ever hire like newly graduates or people without experience? I know you handled a lot of that back in the days at CBS when you were handling the internship program. I don't know if you have visibility on this with Paramount, but can you give us a little bit of information if you do have?
Yeah, I think I would have to like get back to you on certain internship programs. I know they have a couple of different ones, and it's also dependent on the areas. Like, I think LA has different internship programs versus New York. I think it's really like localized probably. Um, right now is kind of like a weird time. I'm sure you've seen the headlines with like the merger. So I know a lot of departments are just kind of like holding off on hiring um positions because of that. And also just the job market really sucks right now, unfortunately. I know my team has gone through a lot of cuts in the past couple of years. Um, so my team itself is very lean, and I know other departments are feeling the same. So that just kind of sucks, and we have to work through it. Um, but in terms of like specific internship programs, I'd have to like get back to you and see if I can get some links for that.
And for those who didn't follow the headlines, what's the merger? We want to know.
Oh yeah. So Skydance is buying Paramount. And yeah, we're just kind of like waiting for the deal to like officially go through. Um,
Okay.
and yeah, we're just kind of waiting to see what happens.
Wow. So it's going to potentially become even bigger now that like two companies are merging together. And but of course, during those times, it's a bit of uncertainty, right? I would recommend for everybody just to kind of like, of course, on LinkedIn to go and like follow, Paramount and MTV Entertainment Group. And even the channels, because that's also a place where you'll be able to see like whenever there's an opportunity, it will be posted there, and they're pretty active in like posting their internship programs as well. So I would highly recommend to go there too. To kind of, you need to do some digging, right? But there's, typically they always have an internship program at least every summer, and I'm sure that it's probably now happening because those are kind of the time frames. Um, so somebody's asking, and I has got six little thumbs up. So where would you suggest screenwriters to look for their first job out of college? I don't know if you have any insight on this.
Oh, screenwriters. That's a good question. I've had a couple of colleagues go into that realm. I can't really speak from firsthand experience. Um, I mean, obviously, the first thing that comes to mind is just really write on your own for whatever you want, like personally. Um, you're gonna have to have a little bit of a portfolio before you have, a professional portfolio to lean back on. Um, so just having that, in your pocket, I'm sure would be helpful. Yeah, I'm not really sure how I can like be a little bit more specific on that
Well,
front.
if I can bring my perspective, because of course we work a lot with aspiring screenwriters as well at Artbound. A nice shortcut to consider is maybe trying to find an internship in a talent agency. because in the end of the day, like as a writer, you'll need to be represented if you want to go somewhere in this industry, or like getting into, I think everybody wants to get into the writer's room, but those are very, very difficult to kind of get from the start. So maybe like looking into agencies and talent agencies, literary one. You have so many out there that are amazing, like not only the big ones like United Talent Agency, but also a lot of boutique ones. So maybe kind of getting an in those agencies just to kind of see like the back end of it and how that works, and how like writers are actually getting, to book jobs. That could be a really great way to somehow shortcut it a little bit. So that's just a bit of an advice as well, that if I might, come in. So we're having so many great questions. I want to do just, I'm going to do a short break to introduce briefly what Artbound Initiative is, so that you all know, of course, like who's presenting this event. And then after that, I want to come back to all those questions. Okay, so as I'm presenting, of course, I would highly recommend for you to kind of keep asking questions. We have so many here, and we'll try to get to as many as we can. So Jen, of course, you know very well our program, right? Because you've been, you are a coach with us as well. So just to introduce to everybody, we are a global career accelerator for creatives. And so what we do is that we have different programs around the world, and we help students and recent graduates to get opportunities in the field, and we also offer courses for them. So those are the locations that we offer, some in the US, New York City, Chicago, LA, London, Berlin, Melbourne, Sydney, and we also have a remote program for those who might not be able to relocate to those places. We are very much focused in the creative industries only. So of course, like areas like what Jen is doing, like production, entertainment, media, from like, talent management as well, also post, music, some photography, but we also have opportunities in like design and, marketing, advertising, fine arts, fashion. So really across all the creative fields. Some examples of like maybe some, less kind of, more boutique firms that we've been working with, not in all, of course, our locations, but Atlantic Picture, really cool production firm in NYC, where we have opportunities in production, post, video editing, script. An example of Picture North, super cool production company in Chicago, also with several internships in the production area. And Friends, a content production agency in London. As you can see, a lot of kind of back and forth between entertainment and advertising, with opportunities in design, motion, content production, social media. Studio Aventi, a creative agency in Berlin, with some really cool also internships in the creative and also in kind of the marketing side. And then one last example of Milkman, a creative agency in Melbourne, that is kind of like working on a lot of like food and beverage brands and a bunch of cool stuff. So basically the program has four main, components. The first one is the academy, where Jen is involved. The second one is a guaranteed internship placement if you get accepted into our program. The third one is the network that we offer. And then the last one is the dedicated support. Just to provide a little bit of information about our academy, we're providing courses that are focusing around entering the industry. Okay, it's nothing, everything's pragmatic in those courses, and it's like basically, two modules. One, teaching you how to prepare for recruitment. A lot of your questions were about that. So how to interview, being paired with senior recruiters to do mock interviews, how to build a great resume and getting feedback from resume writers, how to build a portfolio. For example, if you're an aspiring screenwriter or director, that's going to be reviewed by an industry expert, and then helping you for the recruitment process. And then the second module is all going to be about getting ready for your internship and starting your career. And so those includes industry preparation sessions with industry experts like Jen, coming in and like talking in smaller setting and really getting into the nitty-gritty of the industry, with less people, and so a lot more chance to network. And then internship preparation courses, how to excel, how to navigate challenges, and then also what happens after that internship. So thinking about how to get jobs, specifically in those difficult job markets, with a senior recruiter. So that's the academy part. It's all happening online, and on your own time, basically. Those are examples of some of the coaches. Jen's here. You can see her right there. Examples of some of our coaches that are involved. Jen, obviously, like Justin from Warner Brothers. We have like creative directors from, big ad agency groups, So those are examples of some of our coaches. in terms of the guaranteed internship placements, our internships are typically ranging from 3 to 6 months. Okay, they're all the year round, fall, spring, summer. Right now we're recruiting for summer, and that will be a very close deadline, February 10. I'll repeat it afterwards. The internships can be part-time or full-time. You can do it for credit or for experience. The one thing that I want to be quite transparent about is that as much as I wish we could, we're not in a capacity to guarantee that internships are paid, because we work with a variety of partners, some big ones that pay and some boutique ones that might do unpaid internships for credit. So that's the one thing that you need to know if you are considering this program. And then we have a pretty good track record that 60% of our participants are getting hired post their internship, because we prepare them very well. Those are examples of some of the companies that we've placed, some of the big names that you might know that we've placed in the past. CBS with Jen back in the days, TBWA, Vice, Hypebeast, McCann, but we also work with a lot of boutique firms as well, which are super cool, and you get a lot of exposure. If you go to relocate, let's say you're in the US, you want to go to Europe, we're going to help with visa processing, insurance, housing, making sure that we handle all the logistical aspects, because that's, we're trying to make the travel hassle a little bit less complicated, and then we meet you up for an orientation upon arrival. And then whether you're doing it locally, virtually, internationally, you'll have coordinators from our team that are supporting you throughout the entire process, as well as local coordinators in each city that are organizing events every month so that you can network. And that takes me to the last point of the program, which to me is the most important one. That's the creative network that we offer. We're a pretty selective program, but because of it, we have a small alumni network, which is cool because it's only about 1,000 people. So it's much easier. Jen was kind of talking a bit earlier about cultivating those relationships. It's much easier to cultivate relationships within a smaller network like ours, because it's people are typically quite responsive. And so we offer an app that's a lifetime membership where you're basically seeing everybody, meeting everybody, getting also some job boards, and of course internal workshops and industry talks. And that allows you to really connect with people. We have a lot of great alumni that ended up going towards like Apple, NBC, Aiden, who went to NBC, who was on the other side of the Inside Edition show at the time. People that went to Saatchi and Saatchi, Netflix, Google, TikTok, L'Oreal. So those are great people that you can kind of connect with and like hopefully get some, I guess, relationship going to get some jobs later down the line. So the final things that I want to tell you is that we do have our final deadline for the summer. Afterwards, we're done. We're not taking anybody else for the summer, and that will be February 10. So you have a bit of time to submit. You'll need to submit an application form, go through an interview process with our team. We will let you know if you've been accepted into the program, and then afterwards you can make your decision. So our final application for summer is February 10. You should visit our website if you want to learn more about, the program, the tuition, for the program as well, which will vary based on whether you go internationally, locally, how long you want to do the program for, and also read more about our scholarship opportunities. We do have an upcoming info session if you want to just join about the, to hear more about the program and ask questions about this, because today we'll be focusing more about coming back to questions for Jen. But you have the opportunity to join. There's on February 4, there's another session at 8 p.m. So same time. And the link is here. We'll add it in the chat. And then if you're ready to submit, you can just go on our website to submit your application again before February 10. And then the last thing that I want to say is that we have another upcoming insider talk. If you ever wanted to hear more about an amazing designer at Ralph Lauren, we're doing that on January 30th at 8 p.m. I'm assuming if you're here, most of you are mainly interested in entertainment. But if some of you have an interest in fashion, feel free to also join us. This is also a free event where everybody can come in and ask questions. So I wanted to let you know a little bit more about the program. And Jen, it's been an honor to have you involved. And I excited for those industry sessions that you're doing. I don't know if if there's any questions about the program, we can try to answer them on the chat. But I think right now, like, let's focus a little bit and come back to some questions as well for Jen. Jen, there's a question about like, do you know like where would be a great place to find a producing job? Like, are you aware of any, I don't know, kind of industry job boards or places that you were looking at back in the days when you were trying to find gigs?
Yeah, I actually talked about this yesterday in my industry talk too. Back in the day, I used this website called Mandy.com. So I used that. I also used Staff Me Up. That was another resource that I used. And honestly, like I don't know if people are still using this, but I used to use Facebook too. There's a lot of like groups that I got put on, when I was a PA just looking for jobs. And it would literally just be like someone, a producer or line producer would post, be like, hey, I need a PA in Brooklyn, tomorrow. Is anyone available? And then you would just see people like either start to comment, being like, I'm free, I'm free, free. So I don't know if people still use Facebook groups, but that's honestly how I found, some of my work. Besides getting the random phone call or text from, network contacts. Obviously, as I kind of transitioned myself into the project management space, I definitely turned more towards the corporate route, which is, Indeed and LinkedIn. So that was kind of like a transition I had to kind of like teach myself how to write resumes, how to write, the offer, the whatchamacallit, the letter,
The cover
uh,
letters and all
cover
of,
letter.
yeah,
I haven't done one in a long time, obviously.
yeah.
Cover letter. I had to like teach myself how to do that just because I hadn't been in the corporate world before that. So that was kind of like a learning experience just because I was used to just finding gigs through my contacts.
Yeah.
But yeah, hopefully
I'm
that
sure that was an
answered.
interesting experience and humbling. You know, it's cool because it's also a good humbling experience, right? Like you have to rely on connections, but also you need to kind of learn how to how to pitch yourself to, you know, if you were to be a bit more anonymous, right? So I'm sure that must have been quite interesting.
Yeah, definitely.
So what has been your favorite project to work on? Do you have like an absolute fave?
Oh, I would say probably my current slate of projects, just because I had started at Paramount, mostly in the unscripted world. So I was on Jersey Shore, Teen Mom, a bunch of those unscripted shows. But recently I got put under a different manager, so now I'm doing scripted shows. So I work on a lot of cool stuff. So I do Yellow Jackets, which I was like very psyched about. Um, Dexter Resurrection, Yellowstone, um, all of those like Taylor Sheridan shows. So I was super excited about that. Mayor of Kingstown. I do have to be careful though. I try not to read scripts because I really hate spoilers. So that's hard.
I bet, I bet. So there were a lot of questions about, and sorry, you all, I'm gonna try to get to all of them, but it's there's so many. There were a couple of questions about like, what are your current like short term? Maybe it's a personal question, but you know, since we're getting personal here, like, what are your current short term and long term like plans? You know, how are you like continuing to set yourself up for success in your career? I think, I mean, it's interesting to hear about like what's next, you know, in your minds.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'd like to stay at Paramount for as long as I can. With the merger coming up, who knows what's going to happen. Um, in my current position, I am able to learn from, my superiors, which are directors and VPs of production. And what they mostly focus on is like building budgets and stuff. And I'd really like to kind of delve into like the financial side of it, and learn how to build a budget, learn how productions spend money and why they go to certain vendors and comparing budgets from season to season and see like where we can save money or spend money to make certain things better. So that's kind of like my goal at Paramount.
Yeah.
And then on the other side of that is just job security. So like keeping up to date on skills so that, if something does happen, that I'm not going to be completely like blindsided and not know where to go from there, really.
Right. I think that's a smart move. So it's cool to know that you're wanting to kind of like keep kind of like getting up the ranks like in Paramount. So I'm assuming that means that it's a cool company to work for because otherwise
Yeah.
you'd probably be planning your exit.
Yeah,
Um
I mean, I have coworkers who have been there for 17 years, which is crazy to me.
That's cool because everybody's moving around so quickly right now. So it's interesting to hear that it's a company that's keeping their, that's retaining their staff, right?
Yeah.
So there were a couple of questions about like actors and entertainers. So, a question as an entertainer with little production experience, what transferable skills should I emphasize to help me land, more production internship opportunities? Like, do you have any advice on that?
Um, that's a good question. I mean, I think where my mind goes first is just, if you're an entertainer, then you can focus on your people skills, you know, just being personable and getting to know people and, being charismatic, honestly. And just kind of focus on those like extrovert skills, I guess. Um, until you get to that point where you can really focus on learning, everything else that comes in terms of like, you know, admin or writing or wherever you want to go.
I love that. I love that. I think that's really important for you all to think about is like, Jen was mentioning earlier that as the producer, you're having to deal with a lot of personalities and managing people's expectations and, really being a people's person, I'm assuming. So maybe that's a really great transferable skill to, highlight is like the fact that you are good with people and that you're good with, reading the room and understanding how to, troubleshoot. If you've had else any, for example, like retail experience or food and beverage experience, like restaurant experience, those are great things as well to highlight because you've like basically had to troubleshoot and handle angry customers, which I'm sure is kind of somehow similar to like handling very big egos, right? And I'm sure you
Yeah.
know. So there's a question about like how do you manage the workload and balance? Any organization or productivity tips you found that's happen to work really well, especially in like an industry like yours that's so fast.
Yeah, I talked a little bit about this in my industry talk yesterday. Um, I definitely suggest when you're interviewing somewhere to ask a lot of questions, and as you interview places, you'll kind of get to know the language that companies use, to know whether it's really going to fit in. And obviously, you're going to get jobs where you start there and you're like, wait, this is not like what I'm looking for. But when I was interviewing for this position, I really wanted to hear that they themselves valued work-life balance because that's what I was looking for at the time. I've had the fast pace, always changing. Like I was ready to kind of take a step back and like, really focus on work-life balance because I was burnt out at the time, honestly. So you just kind of like get to know the language that they use and keywords that you want to hear. In terms of like work itself, you just kind of like find tools that help you. I use a bunch of different programs, but honestly, I use certain tools because I get them for free. I use Airtable a lot to stay organized with the shows. And I actually was able to get the rest of my team on board with that, which kind of helped, manage all of our shows at the same time rather than, me just managing, my own projects. So that was good. And, good old notebook and paper and making reminders on my phone, honestly. Just trying to keep on top of everything is it's always going to be a beast to master, honestly. And sometimes I struggle with it still.
Yeah. I mean, that's a lifelong skill to build, right? How to stay on
Hmm.
top of everything and not be overwhelmed. Um, so there's a question about like, what would you say the zeitgeist of, is currently for the industry? Like what type of shows are producing looking for in companies like Paramount? I don't know if you have any insights on that, but it was a question that came back.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like the trend has been I feel like the trend has been really to work on existing IPs, honestly. At least in what I'm seeing that's being greenlit. They want to spend their money where they know they're going to make the money, honestly. But it also depends on like who the upper leadership is, Someone, maybe Skydance comes in and you never know, they might change up, they might want fresh stuff instead of working on existing IPs, like we have no idea what to expect really.
Right. But I think that's an interesting comment that you're saying because I've heard that as well from someone else that now like people are wanting to be a little bit less risky, right? And just making sure that
Hmm.
it's like money is driven. I mean, money will always is driving everything, you know, but specifically now, like people are trying to be sure about their bets, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like that's the trend lately.
Yeah. Well, we'll see how that evolves. So there's a question about like what did you do when you worked on the Daily Show, and how does it compare to working on a reality TV show like Jersey Shore, for example, you know, like if you have any insights on that.
Yeah, so I wasn't on set for the Daily Show. I managed that from like the corporate side, which is really just like helping them with anything they need in terms of like HR and finance and circulating the calendar and stuff like that. And also circulating budgets too, which is pretty cool. But so I haven't really been on set at the Daily Show, so I can't really speak to how that is versus being on set for a reality show. Um, off the top of my head, it's probably pretty crazy, honestly, because you're putting on a show every day. Um, you're producing it, you're live, you're editing it, you're airing it all in one day, which is crazy. They do like 140 to 160 episodes per season, which is a lot. It's a lot.
That's nuts. That must be like nonstop. But fun also, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
Do you know if like Paramount, there were a couple questions about post-production. Do you know if like Paramount, MTV, like do you know if they have internships in post-production, like video editing and things like that? I don't know if that's something, it's a bit outside of your scope, but I don't know if you have any advice on that.
Um, yeah, I don't have any like insider knowledge on programs. I mean, we do have a department for it. So I assume that they do. Um, at the very least, they hire people, at the coordinator level or higher. So I'm not really sure about internships. But I will say that like, on the corporate side, we also deal with a lot of post houses. Sometimes it's just like a lot of work and our internal department can't like they can't do it all. So we do have a lot of production companies that hire third party post houses who help get the work done. um Even on, I'm just thinking of working on MTV documentary films. We work with two different post houses that we just work with directly and pay them directly. So they're not internal, it's a third party company that we hire to send films out for screenings. So that's just like, another avenue you could go is to go with, one of those smaller post houses wherever you are, if you're in New York or LA or, wherever, just to get that experience. Because there are companies, that hire these post houses as, as clients.
For sure. And I think that's great advice by the way you all like maybe looking through, because of course like companies like MTV and Paramount will be outsourcing some of it, right? They can handle in-house all of the loads. So maybe also good shortcuts, right? To kind of like go into those companies, you know, obviously at one point you start mingling with the clients, which is MTV, Paramount, like and then potentially even ways to get in, to get again connections there and maybe transition afterwards. So I think that's a really great, that's a really great insight as well. Um, what for you, you recruited a lot when you were at CBS, and I know you're still recruiting a lot now, right, for the shows and things like that, but specifically you recruited a lot of like younger talent, I mean interns, juniors when you were working. I remember for the Rachel Ray show back in the days, like what what for you made a great candidate, and like in terms of their application, in terms of the interview process, like, who stand out for you and what were they doing to stand out?
Yeah, I would say I definitely enjoyed seeing candidates who had a variety of experience. Um, Even like you said, like if you don't have a ton of, production specific experience, if you've worked in a restaurant, if you've worked in those like, tough places where like I know you can handle stuff. Um, so not just, it doesn't have to just be entertainment. Like people will see the connections on like what can kind of transfer over in terms of like making a good impression and like who was great in an interview. um I definitely enjoyed candidates who asked me questions. My least favorite interviews were where I was talking for like 15 minutes and they go like, okay, thanks, great. And they didn't ask any questions whatsoever. So definitely being curious, whether it's about the industry in general that you're interviewing at or the company itself, or even the person that's interviewing you, what's your experience? How did you get where you are? Um, and stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah, so really make sure that you're arriving very prepared and like with a lot of questions and showcasing curiosity, and also maybe having researched your interviewer to be
Yeah.
able to like ask specific questions, right? I'm assuming that that was something. It always is natural when you're seeing somebody who's asking you questions. You're like, okay, cool, like they've showed up, they've done their work, so most likely they'll also show up on the job. So I think that's a really good advice. There's a question about like, and I don't know if you follow any of that, but what people in the industry or trade publication do they pay attention to? Like, do you know if there's like any, I don't know, like specific press or yeah, publications that people are like having to be on if they're in the industry?
I don't know if I can answer the question to the best of my ability, honestly.
Yeah.
I mean, I think I'm a terrible person to ask just because like I am in the industry, but I don't really pay attention to that stuff. But I'm like that normal, like I'm just, I want to focus on what I'm doing. And I don't like to get bogged down by all the headlines that come out, I just don't, that's just a personal choice for me. So I'm not sure that I can be the best guide on like that question.
Yeah, yeah, of course, of course. That makes sense. And like you're focusing on, I think you're already in it as well. And you're probably like, you probably might not need as much of the publications because you're hearing everything on the job, right? So you're kind of like,
Yeah.
no. Um, there's a question about the workplace culture at Paramount. Like how do they foster collaboration? How do they support their employees, maybe especially those who like just started out, right? I think when did you start with them? Was it a couple years back or
2022, which is crazy.
years already? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely team specific. You always hear of certain teams like maybe not fostering the best, you know, environment for working, but my team specifically has always been great. Our EVP, which is kind of oversees all our production management team. She has like bi-monthly meetings where everyone joins, anybody can ask any questions, which can be intimidating. Obviously, you don't want to, ask anything. But our direct managers are very good with like, you can talk to me about anything. You don't have to bring it up on the huge meeting. But I appreciate the bigger meetings just because it helps foster that like we're all a team. So I get to see, my West Coast counterparts more often. Which is one complaint that I had at my previous job, which was all remote, and I just felt very removed and isolated.
Yeah.
Like I never met anybody, like I didn't meet anyone who hired me or any of my coworkers. So it's the opposite of that, which is great. I get to see everybody every week, and then I get to see everybody online a lot as well. Um, yeah, hopefully that.
That answers it. No, I think that's great insight. And like, of course, you want to stay there. So I'm assuming they're really doing something right because it is a fast-paced industry. So for you to want to stick it out and like continue growing, it means that they were able to provide that balance. Um, Question coming back about the third-party companies that you were talking about earlier. Those post-production. Like, are you at liberty to say, for example, some examples of those companies, or is it something that's very internal? Just to ask, because
Oh,
there's
like
would
to
you name
say the
yeah, the post-production companies, for example.
Oh yeah, sure. So the ones that I work directly with for MTV documentary films, there's Periscope Post and Audio. They're out of Chicago.
Yeah, we work
Um,
with them, actually.
oh nice.
Oh
I
my
love
God. Yeah.
them. Another one is Digital Cinema United. They're more of a global company. Um, and yeah, we work with them to ship out what it's called DCP. So it's like the final version of a film that goes out for screenings. And we just hit them up and they ship it overnight for us and we pay them to do that.
Amazing, amazing. I mean, it's a great idea to go towards those companies too, you know, because I'm assuming there's, let's be real, there's probably thousands of people that are applying for places like Paramount and MTV, right? So it's not necessarily it's not necessarily the easiest thing to get as a first opportunity. So maybe like figuring out ways of like, you know, what are those partners, you know, what are those partners that they're working with, and like how to basically get into the industry, I think is going to be a good way to go. So I want to be mindful of time because we only have 3 minutes left. I think there's like, you know, again, another question about like, you know, first of all, I think people kind of like really, the call list kind of made an impression, right? Like, is there any other advice on how to get on that call list? You know, you were mentioning that you're sometimes texting people for PAs, like any other like strategies that you might think of like how to get, you know, into those small circles.
Um, that's a good question.
It's the million dollar
Um,
question, of course.
yeah, I don't, um, I kind of already mentioned like just kind of like be available. Be open to trying new things. Also, if you get, someone who's like, hey, I have this like connection who's looking for a PA for X, Y, and Z, just kind of like being open to, whatever comes your way.
Yeah,
Yeah, I don't know if I can
get further
like
advice on that. No,
yeah.
that makes sense. And I would recommend just one pro tip also for everybody here is like, you know, if you have zero connections to begin with, like maybe start with what's around you in the sense of like if you're in a university already, right, and you're currently studying, like check out the alumni network. That's what you're investing in. The same way that when people are investing in doing Artbound Initiative in this program, like the long-term things that you're getting, obviously on top of a degree and courses, is going to be the connections. So try to really make sure that you really look through that because that's an angle to connect with people. If you contact people on LinkedIn randomly and there's no angle, they will not answer you. But if there is an angle saying like, hey, I'm an alum of X, Y, and Z, we did the same program, like there might be here a connection that will kind of, I guess, encourage them to respond. So maybe if you've got, you know, if you're like, okay, how do I start from zero? Look around and kind of see who's around you. And even like if you're working in restaurants, maybe there's a bunch of people in the entertainment field in the restaurant because, you know, that are working there. Like try to see who you can, you know, get around in your school, in your immediate networks, like start from there because otherwise it gets intimidating, right? So we all have to start from somewhere. I think that's a big
I
thing.
will say I actually have answered random LinkedIn messages, so it's not always a fail. I've definitely done informational sessions with random people who have messaged me asking me.
Very nice. I love that. You're like we should have more of you because that would be easier. Well, thank you so much, Jen, for like such great, you know, insights and just for being real, you know, with us and like, you know, telling us how it is. I really appreciate that. And I think, you know, it's been very just genuine and candid for all your answers. So really appreciate you all. We're still 200 here on this call after the hour. So, you know, I assume you're all busy and it's late or early for you. I don't know where you are in the world because we have people from all over joining. So thank you so, so much. We will send you the recording. We have your email addresses. So you will receive that, you know, probably tomorrow or the day after in your inbox. Just make sure that you add artboundinitiative.com in your contact because otherwise we might go to your spam. Okay, so just a heads up, like if you don't find it in a couple of days, check your spam boxes because it's probably there. But thanks so much for being so engaged. I'm so sorry if there were questions that I wasn't able to, you know, go to. And Jen, you're awesome. Thank you for being, you know, who you are and for sharing, you know, your knowledge with all of us.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. You can find Jen and I on LinkedIn. If you all want to follow us on LinkedIn, just Google our names there, and then you can just click on the follow button or connect. And then
Thank you.
our latest. Yeah, of course. Bye, everybody.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everyone.
Thank
See you
you so
all.
much. Have a good night.
Thanks. Have a good night, everybody. Bye.
Excuse me, is there the Campus Life Experience QR code by any chance?
So I don't think we have that. I saw so many questions about this, but I don't know about this. So I would recommend that we check with you and see we can follow up with you on that, okay?
All right. Thank you very much.
Sorry about this. All right. Bye everyone. See you all.